I'm your host, Donna Cates, and each week we'll dive into powerful stories, expert strategies, and practical tools to help you take charge of your financial future. Whether you're planning for retirement, navigating a divorce, or simply looking to build your wealth with confidence, this is your space to grow, learn, and thrive. Let's get started with today's podcast. So, welcome everybody. I'm excited to introduce you to Missy Mastel, who runs Impulse Health Ventures. Thanks for joining us today, Missy.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm really eager to delve deep into your career journey. And I'd love to start by getting you to give us a 90-second overview of what it is you do and why you got into it.
Sure. So, thank you so much for having me. I've been very voraciously reading through some of your stuff and watching some of your podcasts. And I think it's so important, the work that you do, in particular, helping women as they start to establish themselves financially and understand that, their financial future is completely within their own hands and they're accountable for themselves. So thank you for what you do.
Yes, you're welcome.
So my company I'm a CPA, and I started out doing what most CPAs do, which is auditing other companies. And I realized that so few companies really, they basically ride the regulation line, right? They say, okay, we're going to do just what's required, right? Which means that the things that they could do, the things that they can, the impact that they can have, they let go by the wayside in favor of more profits, right? And that's changed quite a bit since women have come into the workforce, because women say, no, maybe we won't just minimally approach what we have to do. Maybe we'll actually look at the kind of impact that we're going to have and the kind of future that we're going to, to create for our progeny. So the companies that I run, Mastel Communications and Impulse Health Ventures, are specialists in working with for-profit and nonprofit organizations to create synergies, right? Where we take the nonprofit purpose-driven, impact-focused metrics and we combine them with the power and the efficiency of a for-profit organization. And the synergies that are created there allow organizations to both function for profit and for purpose.
Oh, that sounds so fascinating. And I'm going to say, not being familiar with the nonprofit world, can you tell us just a little bit more about what some of those unique synergies are that you bring from that view?
Sure. So I think that the nonprofits in general and foundations, and there's a lot of women who, in particular women, but there's a lot of what I would call minority citizens who tend to work in nonprofits because they recognize disparity in our country, right? They see that there are some people who have and some people who don't, and they really, really want to work impactfully in ways that give people who don't have a little bit more of the pie, right? So nonprofits in general tend to be purpose-oriented organizations that get their money either from private donations or from foundations or from government grants, and they use that money then to create some access or equity equality that our natural marketplace doesn't create for them, right? So the NAACP is a good organization. They're a nonprofit. Most hospitals, St. Jude's is a nonprofit, right? So when people donate to those organizations, people who couldn't afford cancer care for their children would be able to go to St. Jude, and donations and grants and funding allow those people to get treatment for their children at no cost to them, right? So the idea, and I think this speaks specifically to women in particular, right, is that everybody deserves to have healthy children, right? And to the
Yes.
extent that we can create equities between those people who can afford to have healthy children and those people who may not be able to, we just feel better about the work that we do. With for-profit corporations, they are finding that more and more of their workforce, their vendors, and their customers are interested in those kind of for-purpose impact elements. So if you think about, just think about your average woman joining the workforce, right? She may want to make sure that the organization isn't just taking care of her and her healthcare needs, but is using some of their growth and opportunity to create a better life for other people as well. And so those organizations might support, they might do a matching program. That's probably where most people who work in organizations find beneficence in the organization itself. It says, if whatever you're interested in donating to, we'll match either a part or in full that donation, right? So that's a very simple, very easy way where corporations can marry themselves to nonprofit organizations using the interests of their own employees.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. And that I can relate to. And I love the phrase that you use, bringing for purpose to those profit
Yeah.
organizations. Right. Okay, that's awesome. So tell me, what do you see as the biggest problem in your industry right now, and what are you doing to improve that or solve that?
Well, that's a really great question. I think the biggest problem that we're seeing right now is that people have tended to, the idea of getting ahead right now is so important for people. They really, the problem we have right now is that a lot of people live in this idea of scarcity, right? Whether it's the housing market, can they afford a home where their families are, right? Or can they send their kids to a school, right, that will provide them with opportunities? They're feeling a lot of scarcity, and the environment is perpetuating that feeling of scarcity, right? So
Mhm.
I'd say that my biggest issue right now is trying to get people over that idea of scarcity. The fact is I don't like to say that a rising tide raises all boats, but I will say that for people who are living in that there's a ton of abundance out there, and the people who have the most are looking for impactful ways to create wealth in generations that may not be as susceptible, may not have the opportunities. So I do believe that we have to create the right stories and the right impact measurements. And that's what I'm doing in my marketplace is I'm saying, look, Donna Cates may be amazing at running her business, but my guess is if Donna Cates could spend a tenth of her salary and create an initiative that creates peace in the Middle East, it would be of value to her, right? And so we're trying to create those kind of stories of value, how people give back, what people are interested in. I think purpose, right? What's happening when you live in a world of scarcity is you tend to forego purpose, right, for much smaller objectives and goals. So what I get to do is to explain to people how important having a purpose and a legacy is, right? Um, Eulogy, not resume building, if I could say that.
Mm,
Um,
I love
yeah,
that.
do you know what I mean by that? It's like when you're building your eulogy, it's really about the person that you are. Whereas when you're building your
Right.
resume, it's really about skills, right? So,
Right, I love that. Okay, building your eulogy, and that's building your story and your impact versus building your resume.
Right. And it's not even just, it doesn't even have to be something as far, 8,000 miles away. I mean, when you're talking about creating purpose, your purpose can be right in your community at home, right? You can organize a blood drive, right, in an organization, or create an educational program, right, about money. Like, imagine if you were to support your school system by teaching young women, much younger than me, right, about how important financial matters are, right, to their future, right? Get them beyond that idea of ever having to rely on another person to understand how to balance their checkbook, right? Being able to do it entirely on their own, right? That's also a eulogy builder and a purpose opportunity.
Yeah, perfect example, one that I can certainly relate to. So tell me, I'm curious to know who are you communicating this to? Is it the profit organizations to compel them to incorporate this outlook, or are you talking with nonprofits about telling the story so that they get that support, or a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both, right? I mean, the idea of the perpetuation of scarcity is enormous, right? I mean, you can't go anywhere without thinking that what I have means you don't have, and what you have means I don't have. It's not just an important concept to sort of try to hang on to, but you have to hang on to it through all the other stories of all those other concepts about what you're missing, right? It's so easy to focus on what we're missing and so hard to focus on what we have, right? Like 80 years without the Cold War has remained cold for 80 years, right? But nobody talks about that, right? They talk about imminent threats, but 80 years, longer than my lifetime, right? The Cold War has remained cold, and we don't focus on those things. We focus on what we're missing. So it's really important to tell this story, first of all, to everyone, right? It's important to communicate with that idea that what I have doesn't impact what you can have, and vice versa, right? But really important for organizations and corporations, right? They feel a lot of pressure from their shareholders and their stakeholders that profit is all people are interested in them. I mean, the stock exchange will tell you that, they have these quarterly earning calls, and they need to report positive quarter after positive quarter after positive quarter, right? And that's all that anyone cares about for them. And what their workers and what their vendors and their customers can tell them is no, and their stockholders as well, is no. That's not all we care about, right? We also want you to build an organization we can be proud to be investing our time and our energy and our resources in. And then for nonprofits, it's really, they have a key element here. If you want to be a nonprofit who's getting the benefit of having these corporate donations, you have to be able to tell people what your theory of change is, right? A nonprofit has to be able to say, I go to work every day with the idea that I'm going to have a major impact on homelessness, right? This is my theory of change. I'm going to create less homelessness in the world, and I'm going to do it in this way. And that story has to be big and bright and rational. I hate to bring up that word, but it's so true. It has to be rational. And it has to be something that a for-profit company can get behind. So that means you have to be able to measure your impact. And so when you're thinking about purpose, you might be thinking, oh, maybe this is sort of like, I was dedicated to this. It's a very emotional, ephemeral kind of relationship to this purpose, but it doesn't have to be. So you're training these nonprofits and people who work there. It's important to be able to measure your impact, measure the difference that you're making, right? So it's creating a sense of accountability to a better future in a for-profit organization, and creating in the nonprofits this idea of being, of actually measuring what they do, right?
So they're basically able to show what their efforts are accomplishing versus just talking about it and showing up and trying to do a good job that day for
Right.
everybody.
A story is lovely. I mean, our minds are programmed that way to hear stories. We learn that way.
Mm.
Our minds are programmed to hear stories. And people will tell you, you hear an impactful story at a fundraising dinner, of somebody whose lives has really changed, you're going to raise your paddle, you're going to donate to that fund. But what they don't focus on quite as much is if you tell them that they've reduced homelessness with a certain program from 1,800 people to 300 people, right? Literally cutting it by 80%, you are going to donate as well, right? Our minds aren't programmed for those statistics, but we're smart enough now. We understand them, and we can understand what impact is.
Got it. That makes so much sense. So tell me, what makes you unique about the way that you're helping others right now?
Well, I want to not be unique. I want everybody to think this way. I'd really prefer not to be unique if I could. I wish there
I
were
love
a
that.
million people who thought and felt this way, because there's really too much to do and not enough time to do it, frankly. Um, but I think what's unique is that it's a good question. I think what I would say is that I'm not willing to take no for an answer.
I love that. And that's the thing is I'm reading from your intake form that you want to talk about shared value and how people misunderstand philanthropy and charitable giving and a better way to make an impact. And I appreciated that.
Yes. So in 2011, these Harvard professors came up with this concept called shared value. And these companies used it, for-profit companies started using it as a marketing tool. So let's say you drive an electric vehicle, right? You've purchased a product, and the electric vehicle companies will tell you that you have done good for the environment by purchasing that product, right? That's what the marketing is. The marketing concept is called shared value, that you can do more with your dollar than just drive around the town. You can also create less emissions. But the problem with that is it doesn't really address the issue, which is we don't know how many less emissions, because it's a for-profit organization and their focus is profit. They're not actually giving you any insight into how much less emissions your electric car is doing. So you may have a good feeling about it, but you need those statistics, you need those numbers in order to really understand whether you're creating impact at all. And that's why it's not just good storytelling, and it's not just for-profit companies saying they're doing good for the world. You really need to be able to measure and report on it.
And that sounds to me like where your CPA and processes experience comes into play. You're helping coach people on how to create that validation.
That's right. And it comes from them, right? If you ask, it's a drill down, right? Sort of like an interview, but you have to ask people, what is it that you're trying to get done? And let's measure that. So when you ask a car company and you get beyond that, an electric car company, you get beyond that idea of how much profit they're creating, right? What else are you trying to do? Let's get out some kind of environment, social and governance reporting out on that says, how are you impacting the world by being here, right? And believe it or not, if you can measure those things correctly, it's easier to hire purpose-driven people, right, who will do more work for you because they understand the impact that they're having at their job.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure that's very impactful. So tell me, where do you see your industry going in the next 5 to 10 years, and how are you staying on top of that?
It's yeah, that's a great question too. So the next 5 years are going to be interesting here in the U.S. Most people may not realize, but there's actually a real dichotomy between our current policies here in the U.S. and what's going on in the rest of the world, right? If in the rest of the world, the climate change issue is top of mind, right? To a large degree. Here, we still have a very large profit motive, and I think that'll be a lot of what I'm doing in the interim, right? We have to prepare ourselves here in the US for what's beyond the profit motive, right? Maybe it's more social equity, but it's probably has a lot more to do with emissions and emissions control, right? I think a lot of people are starting to understand that we share this planet, not just with each other, but with plant life, flora, fauna. This planet is a precious resource, but I'm not necessarily sure everybody knows exactly what to do about it and what sort of information they need to understand if they've done enough, right? And I think that's
Yeah, and it feels, to me, it's like it doesn't really impact me until something happens directly to me. Like I have not been, impacted by a hurricane. I've not been impacted by a tornado or the wildfires or any of that kind of thing. But it seems that that's what wakes people up and moves them to action. Um, it kind of shifts their beliefs and focus, I think. Do you find that to be true?
I do think that, obviously, I'd like to believe differently, right? I'd like to believe that people, who are not impacted can sympathize. I think sympathy and empathy in that way is a real challenge these days. Feels like there's so much need and there's so much, outcry against injustices of all types and, climate issues, all of those things. I think we really feel almost burdened by how much need there is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But there's so many of us. There's almost 8 billion people. If we all just take a small portion of something, just a little bit, it doesn't have to be this, you don't have to, reforest the entire Appalachian Mountains, right? No one's going to ask you to do that. But you can take a small sliver of something that's meaningful to you. And you'll find a few things happen. Not only do you feel like you're more connected to those people who are having fire damages and, who are experiencing homelessness and all of those things. Not only will you feel more, but you'll communicate with people you love in a different way, right? You will be passing on to them not just all your knowledge and all of your information and all of the values that you have, but you'll be passing on to them purpose. You'll show them how important it is to hang on to purpose, even in the most dire situations and circumstances.
Mm-hmm. So it all comes back to knowing what that purpose is and focusing on it. That's awesome.
Absolutely. And not just knowing it, but it's something that feels, what feels good to you. You know where your heart is, right? And with 8 billion people, you can focus just on where your heart is. If your heart is in your community, right, that's wonderful. If your heart is in planetary climate change, also wonderful. Find something that's meaningful, that you believe in, and start getting involved. Ask better questions, right? Mm-hmm. Can I get involved with an organization that really understands what their impact is? How are they measuring that impact, right? One thing I find less and less with women, thank goodness, right, is that people, when they start hearing statistics, they think about math. I'd like to change that idea. I'd like to change people from thinking of statistics as a math class and think of statistics as a class in getting what you want, right? So instead,
I like that.
yeah. So instead of thinking about, oh, I've got to figure out probabilities and numbers of all these things, think about how close am I to what I want to happen, to what the change I'd like to make in this world. How close can I get?
I love that. I'm going to have to borrow that, I think, for people who are doing their own financial planning and working towards achieving their goals, even. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
you take it and have it freely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So let me shift gears a little bit. I would love to know a little bit about what your biggest challenge is that you face thus far in life, whether it's personal or professional, and how that's actually shaped the way that you do business.
Oh, okay. Um, so because I come from a place of abundance, it's very hard for me to focus on scarcity, right? I feel blessed. I wake up every morning and the first word in my head is, it's a meditation practice, is thankful. It's not even and I will get to your question, but
Nope.
it's not even I am thankful. It's just thankful because I'm secondary to the fact of that emotion. Yeah. So thankful am
Mm,
I really? Um, I think the issues that I've had have really been around uh, creating something that I believe in wholeheartedly. Right. I started out thinking that the world worked one way, in that it was something where you could trust sort of people to do what they said they were going to do. And then
mhm.
people don't always do exactly what they say they're going to do. Creating a sense of understanding around that, right? Being the kind of person who empathizes with other people, I think was one of my bigger challenges.
Mhm.
And I think going through that idea, I mean, think about yourself at 24, right? I mean, you're going to take a bite out of the world, you're going to create all these new things, and then, the world hits and people tell you, oh, that's just not the way things work, right? Or,
Start poo-pooing.
right. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge. The good news was, and hopefully this will be also beneficial, is that having that CPA, not afraid of money background, right? Not being afraid of money, allowed me to dive in to all that poo pooing and not be afraid, not say, oh, I'm somehow not able to counter these arguments. When both of my kids went to college, I made them both take a dancing class and an accounting class. I said, I don't care what else you do. You can study whatever you want, be whoever you want to be, but you cannot not have a class in accounting, and you cannot not know how to do some counted rhythmic professional style dancing. I don't need you to be experts in either of them. You just can't be afraid of either of those things.
Oh, I love that. What a marvelous idea. And I wish I'd had the dancing. I had the accounting, but I didn't have the dancing. So I just kind of do my thing, right?
Yeah,
It's not what I would call rhythmic for sure.
it's just a skill set that, again,
Mhm,
you're not to sit on the sidelines, right?
mhm. I love that. That's so awesome. So here's another personal question for you. If you could have lunch with any person, living or deceased, who would that be and why, Missy?
I would have lunch with Milton Friedman.
Ooh, and why is that?
When in when he did that message that told people that profit was the only motivation of a corporation, I think he set back civilization overall And although I certainly understand the rational argument for it, but it really hamstrung the US in such a way as to make it, I would make it really hard to be able to respond to the way the country was evolving. And I mean, that was right in the middle of the Vietnam War, right? When so many people were coming back in need of mental health. I mean, not like we're not in a mental health crisis now, but coming back with mental health, physical needs, and to make these corporations feel like profit was their only motivation. You know, I don't know if you know this, but the word corporation comes from the idea of together, right? A corporation is not meant to be an entity that is on its own. You're not supposed to be able to make a corporation of one. A corporation, by definition, means in service to the many. So all these corporations that went for profit, and again, they'll argue, I'm sure, that their for-profit motives are to help their shareholders and they owe all of this responsibility to their shareholders, but they're very so narrow-minded in what they consider to be a shareholder or a stakeholder that I think it's really hamstrung us as a developing nation. And because we're a leader among nations, it's a developing world and community. So yeah, I'd like to have lunch with him.
That would be a fabulous conversation.
I'm not afraid of a little confrontation.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'd love to know, how can people contact you if they'd like to work with you or learn more about what you do?
Absolutely. So we have a website called at mastel.com. But what I'd recommend is reaching out to me on LinkedIn. It's Missy S. Mastel on my LinkedIn profile. And if you want to just learn more about sort of what's going on and how it's going on, I have written a book about it called Generation Giving Back.
Ooh, awesome. We definitely want to promote that for you. Generation Giving Back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can find that on
You
Amazon.
can.
Okay,
And
fabulous.
we'd love to hear from you. If you are working in an organization that you think isn't doing enough purpose work, if you are interested in developing a program or a plan for your own organization, if you are a nonprofit who wants to get more corporate funding, please reach out, because we would be thrilled to. We have some freebies that we can give to you just to get you started on that. And like I said, my big issue right now is just time. So the more soldiers I can bring into this army, the more we can actually make for a better world.
Oh, that sounds awesome. And I thank you so much for being a guest today. And I know our audience is going to totally love the interview. So we thank you
It
again.
was
Okay.
such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And
Yes.
for everything again that you're doing for women and people in general. Thank you.
I hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired, informed, and ready to take the next step in your financial journey. Remember, building wealth isn't just about money, it's also about creating a life that aligns with your goals and values. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with the women in your life who deserve financial empowerment too. Until next time, stay confident, stay empowered, and keep building the life you desire.